My source tonight is Democratic Senator Andy Kim of New Jersey, who serves on the Homeland Security Committee and is urging the president to sell more weapons to Taiwan. And thank you, Senator, for being here, because I wonder how you heard President Xi's warning about the United States' role in between this relationship between China and Taiwan.
Well, President Xi sees an opportunity with President Trump because of how erratic Trump is, because of how Trump has deprioritized Asia Pacific. He has deprioritized the region. He wrote a national security strategy that talked about America as if we were a Western Hemisphere power. He is moving American military assets out from the Indo-Pacific into the Middle East, as America is now bogged down in another war in the Middle East. So Xi sees an opportunity here. And Trump did change some of our policy by explicitly saying that he's going to talk to Xi about Taiwan arms deals, which is first of all, a break from how presidents of both parties have acted in the past, which is why a bipartisan group of senators wrote a letter to this administration urging this administration to follow through on arms sales to Taiwan that was supposed to happen, but Trump has not followed through on. So we are concerned in a bipartisan way about how Trump is approaching this.
Have you heard back from the administration on that letter?
We have not. And I think that that is indicative of just what we're continuing to see, which is this administration continuing to just do what they want to do, not engaging with Congress, whether it's about the war in Iran, which we are now on day 75, or any other actions. And when I see this summit in China, Trump is approaching this from a point of such weakness, both being bogged down in Iran. I mean, he is literally asking President Xi to help him fix a problem that Trump himself started with the Strait of Hormuz. So the fact that we are going there and literally begging Xi to be able to have help on something that Trump is the cause of the problem shows just how much weakness we are in right now. And that is just a place that I think really doesn't serve the American people well at all when they're struggling so much with gas prices.
The president said tonight that in private, Xi committed to not providing weapons to Iran. If that's accurate, and they don't, do you think that that's an achievement by this president in getting Xi to say that to him?
Well, look, President Xi has also said he's not going to send weapons to Russia. Has that actually happened? No. So if President Trump trusts President Xi on that front, I think we're in an even deeper level of problem here. But the fact that, we are seeing this summit unfolding, and what is it that the American people are going to get? I seem to get a good sense of what Elon Musk is going to get. All these different CEOs, these are the same CEOs that sat next to Donald Trump during his inauguration. Again, golden age for them, golden age for these CEOs, for the billionaires in this country. But what about the American people right now that have had to pay $40 billion more in gas and diesel since the start of this war? What's in it for the rest of us? And I think it's very clear with all the pomp and circumstance and the pageantry there that Trump's certainly excited about his own legacy on this front and his own ego, but the rest of us are not getting anything out of this.
I was just asking your Republican colleague over in the House, Jim Jordan, about gas prices and what you just noted there, not just what people are using, also diesel as well. And he said, we all want gas prices to go down, but we are also concerned about Iran and this regime that has done so much evil and harm around the world. What's your response to that argument?
Well, then the president should have came before Congress, should have came before the American people and made a case that this war is what we need to be focused on. There are a lot of dangers. I don't discount the dangers of Iran. I also have to say, look, we have a lot of dangers from North Korea. Does that mean that Trump has the right to start a war with North Korea without the American people's approval? There's a lot of damage and danger, a lot of bad actors that are out there. But when we are putting our service members into harm's way, when we're asking the American people to cover the bill, when they are struggling right now with paying their own bills, that is something that this president is deeply out of line with. And it pains me to see Republican leadership in Congress just continue to turn a blind eye to the Constitution, just to be able to continue to pledge loyalty to a president that is so focused just on himself, profiteering off of the Oval Office. His family is enriching themselves, pushing forward this agenda for the billionaires and leaving the rest of us with nothing.
Senator Andy Kim will obviously be following this entire trip very closely as the president is preparing to leave. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.